Every dealership hides a graveyard, perfect motorcycles that never get ridden. They don't break down, they're taken out of sight, dismantled, or shipped away. The industry calls it strategy. We call it the truth they hope you'll never ask about. Watch until the end to discover how you can score one of these bikes for dirt cheap. Marketing mirage. They were not just unsold, they were invisible. That was the brutal reality facing one gleaming sport bike that had all the right specs, the perfect color scheme, and a price point meant to tempt weekend riders. Yet it sat under harsh showroom lights for month after month, drawing little more than a passing glance from customers. One rider saw it twice and ran his hand over the tank each time. "It was gorgeous," he said, "but nobody even asked if I wanted to hear it run." The dealership never ran a proper campaign, never sent invites, never placed the bike before the right audience. Without that emotional hook, even the most capable models fade into background noise. The machine's failure had nothing to do with engineering. It was the victim of a marketing blackout. The dealership never ran a proper campaign, never sent out targeted invites to test rides, never placed the bike in front of the right audience. Instead, they relied on generic seasonal ads that blurred it in with commuter scooters and budget cruisers. When motorcycles are marketed like faceless appliances, they vanish from the public's imagination. Riders, especially enthusiasts, need a story to buy into. They want to see a bike tearing through mountain switchbacks in a video or dominating the spotlight at a community rally. Without that emotional hook, even the most capable models fade into background noise. In many towns, dealerships once relied on word of mouth to sell exciting new bikes. But in a world saturated with digital noise, that strategy is no longer enough. Without targeted, persistent promotion, models disappear in plain sight, their value eroding before the first sale is made. Those ignored machines didn't just vanish. They became silent liabilities sitting under fluorescent lights, costing more each day they remained unsold. Showroom time bomb. Every day they sit, they bleed. That is the grim math of unsold motorcycles lined up in dealership rows. One finance manager checks the aging list every Monday. For every untouched cruiser, she calculates the interest, often between 5 and 8% annually, plus insurance and space. On a $15,000 motorcycle, that's $62 a month in financing, $15 for insurance, $30 for floor space. Depreciation quietly adds more. "It's like paying rent for a roommate who never leaves the couch," Maria says. Multiply that by 100 bikes and it's a slow, relentless drain on cash flow. For every high-performance cruiser or mid-range adventure bike that remains untouched, the dealer pays. Floor plan financing charges interest on every unit, often at rates between 5 and 8% annually. On a motorcycle worth $15,000, that works out to roughly $62 a month in financing alone. Add to that the cost of insurance, around $15 per month, and the price of the physical space it takes up on the floor, which can be valued at $20 to $30. Depreciation quietly adds another 1 to 2% of value lost each month. That means each unsold bike can bleed more than $100 in cost every 30 days before anyone even turns the key. Multiply that by 100 unsold motorcycles, and a dealership could be losing more than $10,000 a month purely in holding costs. It is a slow, relentless drain on cash flow, and dealers know it. The longer a model sits, the harder it becomes to move without taking a loss. Manufacturers might offer temporary relief, but they rarely cover the full cost of an extended stalemate between the showroom and the buying public. As those financial meters spun faster, dealers reached for their most desperate lever. Deals so deep they cut into the bone. If you're seeing how deep this problem runs, hit that like button. It tells me you're catching every detail. And drop a comment with what you've seen in your own area. Your stories help connect the dots. We're piecing this puzzle together in real time. Discount desperation. Those big deals? They are not generosity, they are a white flag. When a dealer suddenly advertises employee pricing for everyone or 0% financing for 72 months, they are not trying to spoil the customer with kindness. They are making a calculated sacrifice to stop the financial bleeding. For example, a 0% loan on a $15,000 motorcycle costs the dealer or manufacturer around $2,500 in lost interest over 6 years. Cash rebates work the same way. A $2,000 rebate can erase the dealer's remaining margin, but it is still cheaper than letting the bike sit for another 6 months. Even more drastic are below-invoice sales, where the motorcycle sells for less than the dealer paid the manufacturer. This practice sounds suicidal, but for a dealer who is losing $100 a month just to keep the bike on the floor, taking a $1,000 hit up front can be the lesser evil. For customers, these deals are often celebrated as once-in-a-lifetime opportunities. But behind the glossy banners and bold print, they signal panic. It is the point where a dealership admits they cannot win the sale on normal terms. The problem is, discounts alone cannot fix what poor marketing and slow movement have already set in motion. Slashed prices weren't the only escape route. Some inventory simply slipped from sight, erased from the showroom before anyone could ask questions. If dealers are bleeding cash, you shouldn't. Check the description for gloves, jackets, and gear I've handpicked that'll outlast the next showroom cycle. Silent shrinkage. It did not sell, so they made it disappear. In many dealerships, unsold motorcycles are quietly removed from the main showroom without fanfare. Sometimes they are moved into storage, out of sight of potential buyers. In other cases, they are reclassified as demonstrators, loaner bikes, or training vehicles. After spending 30 to 90 days in one of these roles, the bike technically becomes used and can be sold at a lower price without openly admitting it failed to sell as new. This silent shrinkage serves multiple purposes. It frees up prime showroom space for fresher inventory that might have a better chance of moving. It also allows the dealer to adjust the pricing without triggering uncomfortable questions from the manufacturer about why a supposedly hot new model is gathering dust. In some instances, the bike is cycled into a dealer's own rental or training fleet, slowly accumulating miles before being released into the used market with a certified warranty. To the casual customer walking in off the street, it looks as if the dealership is doing well. No obvious rows of unsold bikes, no glaring signs of stagnation. But behind the scenes, the inventory problem has not been solved. It has merely been hidden, moved into a shadow process where the bike's journey takes a very different turn. Clearing the floor was one thing, clearing the bond with riders was another, and that break would cut even deeper. Riding alone. It was not the bike that killed sales. It was the empty parking lot. Once upon a time, local riders gathered for the dealership's Saturday rides, led by a retired firefighter. They'd meet at 8, drink coffee, and head for the open road. You didn't have to buy anything. You just showed up, he recalls. When those rides vanished, he tried to keep them alive in a strip mall lot, but turnout collapsed. Riders formed private groups, leaving the dealer out entirely. Without that space for shared experiences, the emotional connection to the brand withered. When those events vanished, so did the glue holding the community together. Some dealers cut them because of budget constraints, others due to staffing shortages, and some simply assumed they were unnecessary in a digital age. The result was isolation. Riders began meeting in private groups, leaving the dealership out entirely. Without that physical space for shared experiences, the emotional connection to the brand weakened. Without the rides and workshops, dealers stopped being part of the story riders told about themselves. When the ride calendar vanished, so did the trust that kept customers coming back through those glass doors. The trust erosion. When riders stop shaking your hand, they stop buying your bikes. Trust has always been the invisible currency of motorcycle sales, and once it is depleted, loyalty collapses. In the past, many customers knew the sales team personally. The same faces year after year, the same mechanics in the service department. Deals were sealed with eye contact and a handshake, not an electronic signature and a credit check. Now riders complain of feeling like targets rather than valued guests. Pushy sales tactics, hidden fees, and long waits for service appointments have eroded confidence. At the same time, online marketplaces and peer-to-peer platforms have exploded, giving buyers the option to skip the dealership entirely. There, they set their own terms, negotiate directly, and avoid feeling cornered by upsells or service contracts. Once buyers discover that they can get a fairer price and a friendlier transaction from another rider, the showroom begins to feel unnecessary. And once it feels unnecessary, visiting it becomes optional. That shift is not just about price, it is about agency. Riders are choosing the spaces where they feel in control. With control leaving the dealership, so does influence. Suspicion gave way to rejection. not of motorcycling itself, but of the models dealers insisted on pushing. Subculture shift. They were not rejecting motorcycles, just the ones you kept building. A 28-year-old rider walked into her local dealership looking for a nimble commuter or maybe an electric model. Instead, she found rows of heavyweight cruisers and razor-edge sport bikes aimed at an older crowd. "It felt like walking into my dad's closet," she said. Younger riders want smaller, more efficient designs, adventure tourers and scooters with modern styling, but many dealers still cling to categories for a shrinking audience. Without products that reflect them, new buyers simply walk away. The disconnect grows worse when you consider lifestyle branding. Younger buyers value sustainability, tech integration, and affordability over raw horsepower. When they walk into a showroom that looks like a shrine to a fading subculture, they turn right back out. They do not see themselves reflected in the product, and without that reflection, there is no desire. By ignoring these shifts, dealerships are not just missing sales, they are training a generation to see motorcycles as something outdated. Those cultural blind spots hollowed out the last refuge dealerships had. Their role as the beating heart of a riding community. The community void. The dealership used to be a clubhouse. Now it is just a store. For decades, stepping into a motorcycle dealership meant more than shopping. It meant joining a circle where knowledge, stories, and friendship flowed freely. There might be a pot of coffee brewing, a couple of bikes parked out front from last week's ride, and the familiar faces of staff who knew your name and your mileage. That atmosphere made even non-buyers feel welcome, and those feelings often translated into sales down the line. When that sense of belonging disappears, the dealership becomes just another retail outlet. The chairs in the lounge gather dust. The bulletin board advertising group rides stays empty. The showroom is quieter, colder, stripped of the hum of conversations that once carried across the floor. Without community, even the right bike at the right price can struggle to find a buyer because there is no emotional anchor keeping riders in the orbit of the dealership. This absence is more damaging than most owners realize. Without the human connections, customers drift toward other gathering points, online forums, independent shops, and private events. Once the people drifted away, the industry's secrets became easier to hide, and those secrets started moving fast. Auction alley. You never saw it on the lot, but one rider did. A wholesale buyer, he prowls motorcycle auctions like a hawk. He knows the tells. Showroom polish still on the paint, original zip ties on the cables. That one didn't even hit 200 miles, he says, pointing to a sport tourer rolling toward the block. In hours, it'll be strapped to his truck, bound for resale 3 states away. The original customer will never know it existed. Auctions move fast. Tuesday arrival, Wednesday gone, returning cash quickly but eroding brand value in the process. These auctions, often held far from public view, are the industry's pressure release valve for unwanted inventory. Dealers bring machines that are costing them too much to hold and hope to recoup at least a portion of their investment. The process is fast and brutal. Bikes go for far less than their original manufacturer's suggested retail price, sometimes thousands less. In the eyes of the dealer, this is better than letting the unit sit, depreciating and draining resources. In the eyes of the buyer at the auction, it is an opportunity to grab nearly new stock at bargain rates. These auctions often operate with startling speed. A bike can arrive on a Tuesday and be sold by Wednesday afternoon, vanishing into the hands of bulk buyers. This rapid turnover means dealers recover cash quickly, but it also ensures that many potential retail customers never even see certain models. For the brand, however, it is a quiet embarrassment. Each of those cut-rate sales chips away at the perceived value of the model. The public rarely sees this happening, but its ripple effects show up in the used market where prices drop and resale confidence fades. Some of those disappearing bikes didn't stay in the country long enough to gather dust. Export exodus. Nobody here wanted it. Overseas, they fought to get it. While some unsold motorcycles go to auctions within the same country, others take a far longer journey, loaded into containers, secured in shipping yards, and sent abroad. This export exodus has become a lifeline for certain dealers and manufacturers trying to clear excess stock without tanking domestic prices. Emerging markets in Asia, Africa, and South America are often eager to receive models that have failed to gain traction at home. In these regions, even a motorcycle considered outdated in North America can be a coveted prize. Exchange rates, import rules, and market scarcity can turn an unloved domestic model into a high-margin product abroad. The logistics are complex. Export partners arrange bulk deals, coordinate with freight companies, and navigate customs paperwork. For the sending dealer, it is a clean slate. The bike disappears from local records and the lot looks fresher almost overnight. But this tactic has its own cost. The more a brand relies on export dumping, the less urgency there is to address why a bike failed in its home market in the first place. In many cases, these shipments are deliberately timed to align with seasonal demand overseas. A model that languishes in a cold, saturated domestic market can suddenly become a hot commodity in a tropical region. That timing transforms unsellable stock into premium goods, maximizing returns while sidestepping local pricing battles. Even the ones that stayed rarely ended up where they began, passed quietly along a back channel few customers ever see. The dealer-to-dealer black line. Your dream bike? It came from a dealer 1,500 miles away. For a reason, beneath the surface of the retail market lies a dealer-to-dealer trading network, often invisible to customers. This black line system allows dealerships in different regions to swap models they cannot sell locally for those that are in demand in their own territories. A cruiser collecting dust in a cold weather state might be traded to a dealer in a sunny coastal city where riding season never really ends. Conversely, a small commuter bike stuck in a rural dealership might find a better home in an urban market, where fuel economy and size are major selling points. These swaps are not just about variety, they are about survival. The transactions are usually done quietly, often arranged over the phone or through closed dealer forums. Shipping is coordinated to be as invisible as possible to customers who might assume their special order bike was sent from the manufacturer rather than from another showroom halfway across the country. Sometimes these swaps are less about meeting customer demand and more about clearing problem inventory quietly. A dealer with a poorly selling color or trim can offload it to a market where it blends in, avoiding markdowns that would erode perceived value and keeping the manufacturer's pricing structure intact. While this keeps inventory moving, it also means some markets serve as dumping grounds for unpopular models. Yet for a select number of machines, their fate was neither resale nor shipment, but something more final: brand shielding. Some motorcycles never get ridden, on purpose. One mechanic who works in a manufacturer's storage yard spends her days dismantling them. The one in front of her still has its factory tags. It's weird, breaking down something that's never been ridden, she says, loosening a bolt. Frames go to scrap, engines to parts resale. They call it protecting the brand, but she has her own view. It feels like burying a body. The costs are high, but the logic is simple. Preserve pricing now to prevent market collapse tomorrow. Buyers who paid full price feel cheated, and the product becomes associated with clearance racks rather than aspiration. By removing excess inventory entirely, often by salvaging parts, shredding frames, or exporting units solely for disassembly, the brand preserves the scarcity and pricing integrity of its lineup. These decisions are rarely publicized, as images of perfectly functional motorcycles being dismantled can spark consumer outrage. Yet behind closed doors, executives argue that preserving exclusivity today prevents market collapse tomorrow. It is a calculated sacrifice, trading short-term revenue for the illusion of enduring desirability in a crowded, price-driven marketplace. It is a cold calculation. The costs of scrapping a bike can be high, but the long-term damage of flooding the market with cheap models can be far worse. For the manufacturer, the destroyed units are a line item on a spreadsheet. For the consumer who might have dreamed of owning that bike at a lower cost, it is an invisible loss. This hidden layer of the motorcycle business reveals how much happens out of sight. Behind those closed doors, the consequences reached far beyond the showroom, all the way to the factory floor. Supplier fallout. When bikes do not sell, factories go silent. Behind every motorcycle is a network of suppliers. Frank Delaney, who runs a small leather seat cover shop, depends on steady orders from one manufacturer. When those stopped, his workshop went quiet. "I had to lay off 2 people that have been with me for years," he said. Fewer parts ordered means less raw material bought, affecting steel mills and die suppliers. What looks like a retail slump becomes an industrial contraction. And for small suppliers like Frank, one slow season can threaten survival entirely. For large manufacturers, it is a dent in quarterly revenue. For small suppliers, it can mean immediate layoffs or even bankruptcy. A factory producing custom exhausts for a single model might have no other contracts to fall back on. Entire workforces can be idled overnight, leaving skilled tradespeople scrambling for any job that will cover their bills. The impact spreads outward. Fewer parts ordered means less raw material purchased. Steel mills, fabric dye suppliers, and transport companies feel the slowdown. Even local restaurants near these factories suffer as lunchtime crowds vanish. What looks like a simple retail slump at the dealership level becomes a multi-layer industrial contraction. For many suppliers, survival depends on a single large contract, meaning even a small dip in dealership orders can be catastrophic. Without steady production, specialized equipment sits idle, workers lose skills, and the competitive edge that took decades to build can disappear within a single slow-selling season. And when the economic pain ripples through enough towns and cities, it stops being just a business problem. Once the assembly line slowed, the battle moved from production plants to political halls. Political crossfire. When the showroom empties, the fight moves to the Capitol. Politicians begin hearing from constituents who have lost their jobs, from suppliers warning of closure, and from dealers pleading for relief. In some countries, lobbyists from motorcycle manufacturers push for tax breaks, import adjustments, or direct subsidies to keep production running. Trade disputes flare when manufacturers attempt to shift more production overseas to cut costs, triggering accusations of abandoning domestic workers. Tariffs can be imposed or lifted almost overnight, creating unpredictable spikes and drops in supply chain costs. These political moves rarely solve the immediate crisis. Instead, they can deepen uncertainty and make long-term planning impossible for dealers and suppliers alike. Industry insiders warn that political crossfire often has unintended casualties. Smaller, independent dealers, lacking the lobbying muscle of major brands, can be overlooked entirely in relief discussions. By the time any policy support trickles down, many of these businesses have already closed their doors, leaving communities without local sales or service options. Local governments sometimes step in with short-term grants to keep factories open, but these are stopgaps, not solutions. The political narrative often frames the problem as a battle between protecting jobs and letting the free market decide which companies survive. Neither side offers the industry much clarity. That political turbulence didn't just rattle lawmakers, it sent shivers through the investment world. Investor flight. Money hates uncertainty, and the motorcycle market is full of it. When inventories stagnate and retail demand softens, investors start asking hard questions about future profitability. Publicly traded manufacturers see their stock prices dip. Privately held brands face nervous calls from lenders and venture capitalists who wonder whether their money is still safe. The first sign of investor flight is often the quiet withdrawal from expansion projects. A planned new model might be shelved, a factory upgrade could be delayed indefinitely. Research and development budgets shrink as executives are told to conserve cash. These cuts might look prudent in the short term, but they can leave a brand unprepared for recovery when market conditions improve. Some investors take more aggressive action, demanding leadership changes or forcing mergers to stabilize the business. In the most severe cases, they pull out entirely, leaving companies scrambling for alternative funding. Without investor confidence, credit lines tighten and every part of the business, from marketing to production, begins operating in survival mode. As capital fled, the industry stood at a crossroads, staring at two very different futures. If you followed this far, you're already ahead of most people. Subscribe to our channel so that way you don't miss the next story we uncover, because each one pulls back another layer of what's really happening behind the scenes. The fork in the road. This is the choice. Reinvent or vanish. The motorcycle industry has been here before, challenged by economic downturns, cultural shifts, and foreign competition. But the current combination of stagnant sales, globalized supply chains, and rapidly changing consumer preferences leaves no room for complacency. One path forward is to embrace leaner production, aligning output more closely with actual demand. That means resisting the urge to flood showrooms with every possible model and instead focusing on bikes that have clear market traction. Another is to overhaul marketing, not with more ads, but with deeper engagement, rebuilding the sense of community that once made dealerships cultural hubs. Technology can also be a lifeline. Smarter data analytics could predict which models will resonate in which regions. Flexible manufacturing lines could allow faster pivots when trends shift. But all of these strategies require commitment, investment, and, most importantly, the willingness to break from old habits. The alternative is grim. Without reinvention, more dealerships will close, more suppliers will fold, and the industry could face a slow erosion into irrelevance. The decision point is here, and those who hesitate may find that the market and the riders have already moved on. If this opened your eyes to what's really happening in the motorcycle world, don't just click away. Hit that subscribe button now, because the next story we're working on goes even deeper, and it's something most riders will never hear about until it's too late. Turn on notifications so you're the first to see it, and share this video with someone who still thinks the showroom tells the whole story, because they need to know the truth hiding behind those glass doors. The market is shifting fast, and the people who stay informed will be the ones ready for what's coming next. Don't just watch from the sidelines, be part of the riders who see it coming.